Welcome to the latest episode of the B Movie Club. I'm your host Kevin, and this week we'll be talking about the 1987 horror classic, The Lost Boys, starring Jason Patric, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, Jamie Gertz, Kiefer Sutherland. The list goes on and on. For those of you guys joining us for the first time, each week I'll review a different B movie from the past, probably not from the future. You can send in your questions and comments, and we'll talk about it on the show. You can subscribe on YouTube, on our YouTube page, which is at KD9575. You can also reach us at Twitter at KD9575. Also, the simplest thing in the world to do is go to our Facebook page, The Original B Movie Club. Go there are all of our updates. That's a forum where you can post your questions, comments, favorite quotes, and favorite scenes, and links to the YouTube pages, so it's all very easy. So go there, subscribe on YouTube, like the page on Facebook, and tell a friend. Tell everyone you know. Tell strangers on the street. Tell yourself if you forget. Anyway, 1987, The Lost Boys. There's a small family with Diane Wiest as the mother. You might remember her from like Parenthood and those kind of movies. Jason Patric is the older brother, Michael, who was in a few things like Sleepers. He was in The Losers more recently. I'm sure you guys all rushed out and saw that. And the younger brother is Sam, played by the immortal Corey Haim. I guess not immortal. Forgive me. And they moved to a new town. The mom's recently divorced. It's a whole thing. So she moves in with her old father to his beach community, Santa Carla, in California. Filmed in Santa Cruz. Spoiler alert there. And while they're there, they discover there's a bunch of glam rock looking vampires that are roaming the streets, led by especially creepy Kiefer Sutherland in one of his first roles. It wasn't one of his first roles, but one of the roles that really put him on the map for being especially creepy. And then, there's issues between the vampires and the family. Michael, at one point, gets seduced. He doesn't realize they're vampires, so he wants to fit in. He's new in town. What can you say? Peer pressure. And he winds up drinking what he thinks is wine, but might be something a little more sinister. And so now he's kind of a half vampire. And meanwhile, Sam, the younger brother, he meets some friends at the comic book shop who tell him that there's vampires all over town and what can they do. It's a whole big thing. So you've got the evil vampires on one side, you've got the prepubescent vampire hunters on this side, and Michael, who's kind of a half vampire, he's in the middle. He's stuck in the middle. He's having problems. I don't want to give everything away, but it is an iconic late 80s horror film. It is streaming instantly on Netflix, so go check it out. Some things to know about this. This was actually the first movie that Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, the two Coreys, appeared in together, and that kicked off the whole we gotta rush out and see everything the two Coreys made. Although, in retrospect, they really didn't make that many movies together. They made Lost Boys. A year or so later, they made License to Drive, which I'm sure everybody remembers. And that's basically the only ones that people saw. A few years later, they went and did like Dream a Little Dream, which I don't know anybody who saw that. And then Dream a Little Dream 2, exactly. They're buddies. More recently, over the last couple of years, they were on I believe it was an A&E reality show called The Two Coreys, dealing with their careers and their friendship, and they're on the rocks, and oh my goodness. So if you haven't seen that, that's another. It was a source of comedy, but now that Corey Haim is no longer with us, it's not quite so funny any longer. Other things, Jason Patric, the star of the show, Michael, he was in, like a year or so earlier, a movie called Solar Babies, which I'm sure everybody saw. There's a lot of hits here that I'm talking about. He was in that movie with Jamie Gertz, so it was kind of reuniting their chemistry in this movie. So there you go. Kiefer Sutherland had been in Stand By Me as the mean older guy in that thing, you know, bullying the little kids to this. I was joking that they really didn't have to use too much makeup to make him look like a creepy vampire. So there you go. So you've got the two Coreys. There was actually another vampire kid in this, vampire hunter kid, who was the other Frog brother. It was like Corey Feldman was one Frog brother. I know it's very complicated. He had a brother who was also Frog. They were Edgar and Alan Frog. Let the fun begin. He really didn't go on to do a whole heck of a lot. So in that way, he's not that much different from the other Coreys. So thank you. I'm here all week. Anyway, what else can I tell you? Originally, the plot called for basically a bunch of prepubescent vampire hunters, which is what you see from the Frog Brothers. It was going to be directed by Richard Donner, who, you know, gained fame for Lethal Weapon, but had previously done The Goonies. So they wanted to do kind of another Goonies type thing with now the Goonie kids dealing with vampires. Again, he passed on this. He still wound up producing it, but he didn't direct it, because then he did go on to do Lethal Weapon, which of course became a big hit. Instead, he passed the directing duties to Joel Schumacher, who up to that point had just done St. Elmo's Fire. And when he saw it was about a bunch of little kids, he said, no way, let me change it so now it's teenagers. We'll have a little bit of the kids in there with the Frog Brothers and Corey Haim, but I want all the vampires to be like teenagers, could be more sexy, as he put it. I think we all agree it was very sexy. There you go. Where does the title come from? The Lost Boys. A lot of people don't know, though some of you may have figured it out. It's from Peter Pan, where the boys never grow old, they never grow up. They're a Toys R Us kid. So there you go. And some of the names actually come from Peter Pan. You have a Michael, you have a Lucy. Originally, the Kiefer Sutherland character, David, was going to be called Peter. So, but then I guess they thought that was just too much. No can do. Movie was a huge hit. You know, it kind of kicked off that whole kind of a glamour vampire thing. Again. The vampires all looked very glamoury. I mean, they all had like that long hair, and I mean, they could have been, you know, roadies for Poison. So there you go. Little known fact: one of the vampires went on to play Bill in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He was actually the first vampire. Ooh, excuse me, spoiler alert. Who gets stabbed. So there you go. He was the little one. Some questions about this movie. One scene, the head vampire, I don't want to spoil it, I'm not going to tell you who it is. He goes to Michael and says, you're the man of the house, I'm not coming in unless you invite me. And Michael, not knowing what he's doing, because he doesn't know he's the vampire, says, you're invited. Here's the problem. Michael was not the man of the house. Again, they moved in with his grandfather, so it was the grandfather's house. Nobody ever asked the grandpa if he was invited. The grandpa if the vampire was invited, and he was in the other room. So, there you go. Later in the movie, the evil vampires, not the main vampire, but again, the rocker vampires, bust into the house. No one invites them in. What's the story with that? Can't explain it. So, they kind of do their own thing with the vampire lore. There's a lot of scenes that I call the Jaws shark scenes, where there's people running from, you know, the point of view of the camera, essentially, so you don't see the vampires swooping in, you just see people looking over their shoulder. No, there's a vampire. Just like Jaws. So I'm sure that saved a lot of money. Again, in Jaws, they didn't show the shark for like, you know, 7/8 of the movie because it kept breaking down. In this case, you don't see the vampires flying around really that much. Saves money. Just have the camera swoop in from above. It makes it seem as if there's vampires swooping in. So there you go. Good times. If you're planning on sitting down and watching this with your children, some things you want to know. Overall, the movie is scary. Not too scary, but for a child it would be definitely very scary. There's only one scene where it's especially gruesome and violent. And that's the bonfire scene where the vampires swoop in and kill a bunch of crazy surf Nazis. Aside from that, not too bad. They were going to make, actually what they were going to make, they did make 2 sequels in the late 90s and the early 2000s called The Lost Boys The Tribe and Lost Boys The Thirst. I'm not sure which one was the second or the third. Doesn't really matter. They were straight to video. Corey Feldman was in both of them. Big shocker. Corey Haim, I think, was in one of them. I think he got cut out. If you watch the 2 Corys, Corey Haim gets kicked off the set. He was in no place to be acting in movies, evidently. There was supposed to be a sequel that came out like a year or so later called The Lost Girls. Kiefer Sutherland, spoiler alert, who gets killed at the end. I think Michael pushes him on like some antlers, and he's supposed to be killed, but you don't see him melt or explode or anything. The idea was, even though he got ran through the heart, he manages to survive and create some more vampires. Needless to say, they couldn't get a script going that they liked, so they took a pass on that. What are you going to do? Anyway, nonetheless, Lost Boys, great film. It's actually 87% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, so go check it out. It is streaming instantly. Again, if you have Netflix, if you have a Roku or one of those DVD players or Blu-ray players that actually allow you to go online, or an Xbox, you can watch these shows streaming instantly. So I highly recommend it. Check it out. Next week, I'm kind of switching gears here. I've been kind of doing, for the last couple weeks, some under-the-radar stuff. I'm going back to basics. We're going to a sports film that you might be a little bit familiar with. Rocky III with Sylvester Stallone and Mr. T. Now I know what you're thinking. Not much of a B movie there, K-Dog. That was a big hit. In fact, it's a huge blockbuster. True. There's nothing I can say about that. You're absolutely right. I'm in the wrong. However, I just feel occasionally I gotta mix it up, you know? And occasionally it becomes whatever Kevin wants to do for that movie. So, bear with me. It is streaming instantly on Netflix, so check it out. Send in your questions and comments. Like I said, you can post on our page on YouTube. You can tweet us on Twitter at KD9575, and please like us on Facebook, the original B Movie Club. Check it out. As you know, I end every episode with a totally out of context quote, and here it is. It's the attack of Eddie Munster. So there you go. Thank you for joining us, and be well.